I've never been in a food fight. Should I still try to do it?
try to have a food
Maybe.
right. So,
Try to have a food fight.
so you shoot a film and then you can have a food fight in it. People won't
Well,
think
it's
you're
good.
weird.
And welcome back, our dear listeners. Today in the podcast, something a bit more different for all of you. Kari has already been kind of threatening you all about us doing this thing where we ask back into the podcast our previous friends and collaborators. This time to talk about more about their projects and about them per se, and not so much just international cinema. And our first ones to actually get this special treatment, our trial run episode in this podcast episode format, as one might say, we have our past friends from the Asian cinema circuit, the two professional film industry veterans, the spearheads of Mint Volcano film movement, and the hosts of the similar way titled Mint Volcano YouTube channel. Seriously, guys, you need to check them out. Nick and Luke, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey everyone.
Yeah, welcome back.
How's life for you two today? It's been some time since we last time chatted.
Yeah, it's been more than a year. Everything is going good. I'm still in Taiwan, although I am probably going to be moving back to the States in a few months, but still in Taiwan, still working, still doing the Mint Volcano YouTube channel.
Yeah, thank you for having us, Henry and Carrie. We are very excited to talking about our piece again.
Our pleasure.
Yeah, to get this on the right foot right off the gates, Nick, you mentioned that you are currently in Taiwan, perhaps moving back to US at some point, but kind of the first question that really intrigues me is, like, what is your story? What took a director from Boston to all the way to Taiwan?
So yeah, that's interesting. I actually did an exchange program in Taiwan my sophomore year of university. So there was like this program. I didn't get into the film 1 program that semester. Like, it was full, and I didn't know what I was going to do, because I was like, well, I'm in film school and I'm going to be spending a whole semester not shooting anything. All the classes I got, none of them were I was able to shoot stuff. And a friend of mine told me, while I was working on his film, he told me that he had done this Taiwan exchange program at this film school called Shishin, which is like a very prestigious school in Taiwan. And the coolest thing about it was that it was free, because it was like a trial program. So you got a free semester of school, and you got to go to Taiwan, and I would get to shoot stuff in Taiwan. So I was like, it was kind of a no-brainer. It was kind of like a secret too, which was a cool thing. Like, not that many people knew about it. So I applied for it and I got in, and I went to Taiwan for the semester. And when I was here and I was working with the other film students here, I really felt like a strong connection with the way that people worked here, the mentality. There was like a passion and kind of like I would say there was just like this willingness to go the extra mile that I think in the film program that I was in the United States, like, people were very professional and very dedicated, but there was something about it where it was like there was a certain way that things needed to be, but I felt like there was more exuberance in the way that the students were in Taiwan, and like the things they were shooting and the things they were trying, and it really connected with me. So I had a great semester. I went back to Boston and I finished my university program there. And when I was going to graduate, all of the the students from my program, they almost all of them move to LA, go into the industry right away and start working. And I wasn't really ready to do that. I didn't really feel a connection to that path. I kind of didn't really feel like that. And I just remembered that my time working in Taiwan and shooting stuff in Taiwan was so great that I just decided, you know what, I'm gonna go back and see what happens. So I came and I started teaching English first, and then I got into a master's program in Taiwan, communications program, and just kind of things started going well. I started getting freelance work. I was able to stop teaching English and able to work as a filmmaker full time. And yeah, and just at every moment, things kept working out in Taiwan. I met Luke, working on the 48-hour film project. Was the first time we met each other. So Taiwan just kind of always kept delivering good things to me. So it was never like a plan to stay for as long as I have, but it just kind of worked out that way.
But that's actually, Nick, that's quite a story, and like quite inspirational also, especially the part where you yourself chose that you are going to get back to Taiwan, because usually the way how, well, at least my perception of the industry and what we want when we are working in the industry, it's more like we want to get to Hollywood, we want to stay close to home, get into the production companies near us. So it's either like we wanna stay on the domestic market, or that we wanna try to chase the Hollywood dream. And for you, it's been like this a deliberate decision to take another road.
I think it was kind of an interesting choice for me. It's not like a path for riches and fame, but it was something that I felt like it was right, and I don't know if people believe in like fate or anything like that. It just felt like the right thing to do for me, and creatively it felt fulfilling for me. So that's why I decided to do it.
What about Luke? Just a quick summary about you. Well, I guess it's kind of obvious why you were in Taiwan, but now you're in New York for over a year. So how did that come about?
Well, I wasn't studying in film school. I was an engineering student when I was in college. But I knew when I was very young, I loved photography and movies. So when I was in college, I went to the photography club that you study how to operating cameras, right? It won't take me too long to be the best of the club, and then I realized I wanted to really do it for my rest of my life. So I graduated from university, but I didn't become an engineer. I just decided to do photography. So after I graduated from college, I go back to Taipei, and then I find a job in studio trying to be a photographer. And in the meantime, I just trying to participate in as much as I could. So I went to 48 Hours Film Festival, and where I met Nick, and we started collaborating ever since. And he is the best director I have ever met, because we share the same idea. We have the same passion, the energy, the way we work. It's just perfect match. So for me as a photographer, I really want some director that I can some sort of energy or idea, mentality of film. So it's so comfortable to work with him. And the reason I went to the United States is because my wife, she kind of relocate to New York. And I figure it's good, I mean, as a filmmaker or photographer, it's good to exploring the world better, just go to places and then seeing more and then enrich your life, right? So I didn't say no, and I even encouraged both of us to go. I didn't expect how long we will stay here. We just following the flow to see how it goes. Also, I trying to do more film stuff here. So I went to school, SVA or SCP for filming classes, and there I make some good friends, and I still making some indie films, collaborating with students or or someone they want to make film together.
So you had a mechanical background, so do you think that plays somehow into your passion as a photographer?
Yes,
I
because
think you kind of alluded to that.
exactly, because photography involves a lot of technical stuff, right? The camera, the lighting, all those technology is updating every single day. So for me, camera is just toys. I really enjoy playing with toys, right? So it's fun for me to really get deep into the technology behind the camera, how it works, how you make it look better. And also I really enjoy the artistic perspective of the photography. So combine both, I think is perfectly matched for my personality. So I feel photography is my whole life pursuit. So yeah.
Right. For Nick, maybe this question, well, it wouldn't suit for Luke, but how do you see your journey as a person, how you might have evolved, changed during your time in Taiwan as a filmmaker or as a person trying to kind of assimilate into the local culture, learning how everything works, all the ins and outs that you need to. How is the whole working culture different to what you would perceive in the US and all things like that, all the cultural differences?
Ooh. That's an interesting question. That's kind of hard to answer. Let me think.
Yeah, but I guess you had a lot of difficulties first when you arrived there and needed to know how things work.
Yeah, I suppose, learning the like when I first came, I didn't speak Chinese. So learning the language was an important obstacle. And the better I got at Chinese, just the better everything started to work. I think being able to communicate with people, even though it's funny, Luke and I on set usually use a mix of Chinese and English, and probably more English, but just being able to have Chinese and be able to speak in Chinese with Luke sometimes, and like he knows that if he needs to, he can speak Chinese, and I know if I need to, I can speak English with him. I think that really works well in our working relationship when we work together. And I find that working with people, just if they kind of know, even though people speak English and their English is pretty good, if they know that you can also speak Chinese, it gives them a little bit of it just puts them a little bit at ease, where they don't feel as much pressure, and then they're still able to speak English with you, because I think they like to speak English with you, but they don't feel like, oh no, I have to speak English. It allows them to relax. I found that was like a big change of like, when I meet people and I'm gonna work with them, their first question is always like, can you speak Chinese? And I'll say yes, and they'll be like, okay, good, but they'll still speak English with me.
Oh, that's interesting.
So I find that learning Chinese really helped a lot in being able to work with people. And then the other thing was just kind of I think in any place that you work, I don't think this is exclusive to Taiwan, but just getting to know more people, the more people that you know, and the good relationships that you have with people are really important in kind of people being able to trust you to work on their films, especially when you're dealing with smaller works or independent films. It's a lot about trust with the person that you're going to be with, because when you're working with somebody, you have to have a good relationship in order to work well together and in order to create something, because there can be a lot of pressure when you're working on something. So you need to have this kind of good relationship. So I think developing those relationships the longer I've been here has helped a lot in creating stuff too.
And a little tangent on that language aspect. How long did it take for you to learn Chinese, or did you learn some before you came to the country, or did it take?
Not really. I didn't know very much. I took like a class and I got a C in it. So I didn't do that well when I was learning in the US. And then when I came, I got really serious about it, and I was taking one-on-one classes like 3 to 4 times a week. and I basically just like was very, very serious about it for about 2 years. And then I kind of got a basic level after about 2 years. And then from there, I was able to get better exponentially by being able to just talk with people and have conversations with people and like learn a lot quicker. So I would say it took about 2 years to be able to get kind of a early intermediate level. And from there, I think I got better a lot quicker.
I would imagine it's easier to start talking or use the speaking language instead of writing language.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, my writing is still not the best.
Right.
For me, Nick is he really know and respect Taiwanese culture. He really knows stuff. He's not just know language. He know the culture. He know everything. He talks like Taiwanese. He dresses like Taiwanese. He eats like Taiwanese. So he's really get into it. And then you feel it's not about language. Sometimes it's about culture, and he really know it, and he really appreciate it, and he studied really hard, and then a lot of I would say the way he think, the way just the way that feel make me feel really relaxed, like like your family, like he's your neighbor or something, really.
Wow, Luke, that means a lot to hear you say that.
That's true. It's very true. So yeah. And also he's from the United States, so I love working with him because he knows stuff about Taiwan, and also he from different backgrounds. So for me, I really pick out a lot of stuff from him. So appreciate it.
Amazing.
So one reason why we wanted to start with you, especially when we were choosing like who is the first one we asked to be our returning collaborators on the podcast, who we are going to focus on. And me and Kari, we pretty quickly zoom on to you two. And I guess the reason why we were so intrigued to have you return back to the Flick Lab is that we kind of, you two, you kind of mirror me and Kari in the sense that both me and Kari, we have done and we do our own separated individual stuff and work on individual fields, but we also do collaborations like this podcast. And that's also something that kind of unites the two of you. You both have like a long-running resumes of stuff that you've done individually, but you also have had hugely successful career as a collaborators. Like for example, the effects, your recent short film, or the highly successful Everything Rises. So to kind of ask you from the artistic perspective, we have already kind of talked about how the work kind of balances itself out between the two of you guys. But if I would ask from the artistic perspective, like artistics wise, what do you guys feel? What have you gained from each other in your collaborations?
I'll go first because Luke said a lot of nice stuff about me, so I need to return the favor and say a lot of nice stuff about him now. I think the thing that is great about Luke is when he's talking about the technical stuff, and he really does care and pay a lot of attention to that stuff. And when I work with him, I can trust that part of the production is going to be done well, and it's going to be handled professionally. And there's this thing that he mentioned about our having kind of a good connection between the two of us that is really important when you're working on a film. And I think there's a word in Chinese called 默契, which is like you're able to, the meaning of it is kind of like you're able to know what the other person is thinking without having to like say so much. And I think that Luke and I have that where when we work together, I'm able to kind of, he kind of knows like what I'm gonna want and what I'm gonna need without me even having to like say. So one example would be like we're shooting stuff and we're setting up stuff, and maybe he doesn't have anything to do, but I'm working with the actor. Luke will go and he'll take close-ups of stuff, just whatever, little things, while like if he's able to, if it's not like if he has the time. And when I'm looking through the footage later, I'll see like, oh wow, Luke got all this like close-ups of little details that I can use in my edit, and I didn't even have to ask him to do that. Stuff like that is just so amazing when you're working on a film. And I think as a technical person, like photography is just like not something that I love, and a lot of people do, and a lot of directors do too. But for me, I've always been more attached to the post-production and editing stuff. So having somebody that I can work with that really loves the photography side is just so great. And I can always trust that like that part of it is gonna be done well. So and I guess what I learned from that, the thing that I learned from that is that when you work with people, you can't do everything. I was kind of used to trying to do everything. But having somebody like Luke, who I know I can just be like, okay, I'm giving this to him and I'm letting him have the creative control over this aspect of the film, and kind of letting go of that a little bit is a good lesson, I think, for filmmakers. I think a lot of people try to control everything all the time, and they think that a director needs to be controlling. But I think a director also needs to allow good people to do what they're good at. So I learned that from Luke.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah, I guess that's a lesson that kind of is shared by all the directors, because I also had the exact same experience. I have to also learn that the hard way. Do not try to do everything by yourself. But yeah, Luke, sorry I ran all over you there. So you were saying?
No. Oh yeah. I mean, for me, I feel the same way to Nick, because he gave me a huge freedom to be able to film. I mean, some director really taking control of everything, and I have no little choices myself. I just kind of like camera operator, you know. But for Nick, he gave me like huge space, like huge freedom to make me do photography, and I really respect that. And when I work with him, I wanted to do my best because he gave me his trust, right? So I would say I'm so happy to work with him. It's not only because he's so talented and he knew everything, but also he gave me the freedom to perform my skill, my vision. And then we would talk about a lot of stuff before we shooting, and then so I have better idea what he needs. So when we on set, I can kind of just trying to do my best to able to do the photography and also make something more interesting.
Do you have any idea how many collaborations you have done together at this point?
Ooh, that's a good question. Let me see. Maybe 1, 2, 3. At least 10, maybe 10 films.
About
10
10
short films.
10,
Right.
Something like that.
Right. And by now we of course know that you have an amazing chemistry together, but how about when you have started to work in Taiwan, or even across different years in being in Taiwan? Like, is there ever those moments where somebody local would be asking you that, no, that's not what a Taiwanese person would say, or they're telling you to alter the script or do any changes because it's not natural, or was there anything like that?
I can't think of anything like that. Like, I think I always tried to be open. Like, for example, on Everything Rises, I wrote that script in English, and then I sat down with the actors and with Luke and with everybody else in the crew who's all Taiwanese, and we all kind of went through, and we did this with effects too, went through it, and we talked about it, and we said, okay, this line is in English, how would you translate it? I didn't try to translate it myself. I basically was like, look, this is what it says, how would you say it? They tell me the Chinese, and I think, okay, that's pretty good. What about, and we just talk about every line. And the actors actually translated all the lines themselves with us, and we all talked about like, oh, this line seems natural. This is what this means. This is like a good connection to the English idea, and we discuss it that way. So I think, in general, I don't know if we ever ran into that problem because I tried to allow the people, like Taiwanese people, to have that part of that kind of also creative control over that, because I'm never going to be able to write Chinese like a native speaker. So makes sense to allow them to come up with the dialogue, the exact phrasing.
Right, makes sense. There's a couple of themes that repeat in your works, I would say. I'm not sure if the right way to describe this first one is anti-capitalistic things, like in effects. It could be also just some kind of a yearning for nature, like the quotes such as "technology makes us miserable, they should have never built a city like Taipei," etc., etc. What is, by the way, this nature area in effects? Because it feels like it could be like a famous spot.
What was? Oh, right. Yeah. It is actually quite famous. Yes.
Right. Anything else, Henrik, that you found, like the similarities in these projects? Because there's quite a few of them.
Well, perhaps the biggest one that I noticed, outside of course, the critique of capitalism, which I also felt is quite strong element in your works, especially long run with Nick, who also his like early solo stuff actually was quite critical of, well, at least my reading was that it was kind of a quite critical of capitalism, quite critical of a different type of systems, like for example social systems in gatherings and between persons. There was kind of this punk rock vibe that I got, and I still do get from a lot of stuff that you guys do. Another kind of a, like, in my opinion, a repeating theme would be the theme of urban isolation. It's the easiest one to spot perhaps when looking at effects. Like Kari already said, we have we have empty streets, we have people alone in a lot of places and in a lot of spaces. In fact, to a point where at times seeing exactly how small country Taiwan is and how densely it's populated, it almost feels like it's actually harder for you guys to get all those isolated moments in the cities than it would be like just get a random big enormous group shot where you have like 50 people. It would be easier to find those 50 people than an empty street. But yet in your work there's a lot of emptiness, and there's actually a lot of playing with the theme of emptiness and abandonment of a space. I'm strongly thinking about the fashion photography work that you have done, and for example some of Luke's photographs.
Mm-hmm.
There's the dolls photo shoot, which has that staircase in the pitch black night darkness, and that's kind of like that staircase, that photo of a staircase. It's a kind of a combination of a space and empty space, a certain type of anti-space. The darkness surrounding the staircase kind of gives it a kind of a cage around it. And the combined effect, it's something that, well, at least to me, it did remind me like, for example, a lot of Inception and the Penrose Steps paradox that was presented there.
Oh, wow.
So I would say that, space and not space is something that, you guys have lots in your work.
Yeah, depth.
Oh, wow, thank you.
Depth of spaces.
And in fact, to continue from that tangent just a little bit more, we can to touch another film that you guys made, Dark Landscape, which is a horror short film, a kind of a ghost story, but from a completely different angle than traditionally. So I would, perhaps the first question relating to Dark Landscape, like, what is your relationship with horror films and ghost stories?
So for me, I really love horror films. Like, that is like when I early started to get into filmmaking, I really liked horror, and I love like the DIY as you mentioned, like punk rock aspect of horror. And I find that it's a genre that you can experiment, but also people are willing to accept that experimentation because you can kind of say it's supernatural. Whereas if you do it with drama or other genres, people kind of are a little bit more critical. They're willing to be like, oh, I don't really understand. But with horror, people kind of suspend their disbelief. So I was always drawn to horror for the way that it allows experimentation. Originally, though, like if you mentioned one of my earlier works, kind of Crush, which is like a more punk rock kind of like splattery kind of like messy kind of film.
Yeah,
I think as I kind of got older, I think I kind of I'm a little more introspective, thinking about stuff. So Dark Landscape is kind of that, trying to bring that dramatic side to the horror genre, which I've always wanted to kind of go back to and explore. I always want to go into the horror genre, but I feel my sensibilities as a director are probably a little bit more serious. so Dark Landscape is kind of trying to mix those two things. It's trying to make a film that's a horror film, but also like arty and exploring a lot of the themes that I think about a lot, which is, loneliness, alienation, stuff like that.
Yeah, Crash that you mentioned, that was one of the films that I was strongly thinking about. And also Midnight Snack was something that...
Oh, yes.
Like, I visited the Mint Volcano YouTube page, and you made a video about the first Tetsuo,
right,
the Iron Man, where you were talking about like the real punk rock aesthetics, and like what is punk and what would be punk filmmaking, and you shot some pretty harsh comments towards the recent Cyberpunk 2077 video game, where you said that it's like you made the notion that Cyberpunk is kind of like a business version of punk, in the sense that like you accuse the game that it's not really punk, it's just kind of taking an aesthetic, a punk aesthetic, and that's all that it has. And I was kind of like, okay, that's an interesting notion. And then, visiting your earlier works, visiting Crush, looking at Midnight Snack, looking at Duck Season, I actually started to like, I kind of got a hang of like where you are actually coming from. And I saw like that, like, yeah, you are being driven by the dirtiness and the messiness that is kind of that you said that is in the core of punk. When you want to do real punk, you have to be messy and kind of all over the place. And that's a lot, like, to put it in a simpler terms, so looking at your past work kind of opened to me your points about Cyberpunk 2077 and also the points you made about the Tetsuo.
Yeah, I think having that like human, I think punk rock in general is like very human. It's like this feeling of being alive and kind of allowing things to be not perfect. It's very like the anti-AI. So I think I definitely do want to kind of revisit that messiness, because I think there's something very interesting there, this idea of not everything being perfect. And it's something that disturbs me about like the Netflix aesthetic and like the way that films are now, is like everything needs to be clean. I think people expect that, and audiences expect that films have to be so perfect, and they're not willing to watch something if there's like minor technical flaws. But there's so many great films that you can see if you just allow a little bit of messiness, dirtiness, kind of imperfection. And I think artistic movements in the future, personally, my opinion is like, allow people to experiment and try things and do weird stuff that is maybe not perfect. Don't get attached to this idea of like something is good because it's clean. That's very important to me.
It might be an aspect that people gravitate towards years and years later. They remember those little things that were kind of not supposed to be there, but then they turn to love them. Yeah, one thing that I noticed about your projects, The subject of food is reoccurring in your projects. Kind of, if I may say so, kind of the abuse of food, perhaps, or the horrification of food, if that's a word, prevalent. So, Nick, why do you hate food so much? Okay.
Yeah, it's so funny. Like even when I was in film school and I was writing scripts and I had ideas for stuff, my roommate, his name is Jeff. I'm still friends with him. He mentioned, like, as I was working, I think when I was making Crush, he was like, man, you really like just like messy food and like things just being like gross and like destroyed. And yeah, I don't know why, but there's just something so fun about that to me, of like food. Maybe it's like the childhood thing of like a food fight, you know, like who doesn't like a food fight, right?
Yeah. Yeah, right.
I can say I've never been in a food fight. It's one of those things that you kind of notice when you are in your 30s, and you realize you never actually did that as a kid, and then you start to think that, like, now as a grown-ass man, should I still try to do it?
try to have a food
Maybe.
fight. Right. So,
Try to have a food fight.
so you shoot a film and then you can have a food fight in it. People won't think you're weird.
It's good as excuse to do it.
And you know, hey, that's a great point, that you can do that when you're filming. You can do so many things when you're filming. Kind of obvious, but you get special access to people, and well, kind of like what we're doing right now, or you get interviews with people you would never in your life get access to otherwise. But then you say that you're gonna do an interview. Okay, great. When? So that kind of thing, and you can do all these crazy things. Right. I was just thinking, was there anything related to Chinese food symbolism there that I might have missed?
So in the film Midnight Snack, part of that, what that film is kind of about, is it's a guy goes to the night market with his girlfriend. She buys him this food and he eats it, and it kind of takes him over and kills him. Basically, is what happens in that film, and that kind of, for me, was, I think there's this kind of phenomenon of Westerners or foreigners that come to Taiwan, and they are kind of helpless to because they don't speak the language and they don't understand the culture, so they're a little bit helpless to what their girlfriends kind of give them, and they're controlled in a way by their significant other, girlfriend or boyfriend, and so it's kind of a comment on that, of like how this idea of food being given to somebody, it's a very controlling aspect of your life. It's a huge part of your life. So that film was kind of about how people allow their significant other to kind of control certain aspects of their life, and kind of like a trap feeling that you can get into if you allow that to happen to yourself, and you kind of just go with the flow of what another person wants you to do. And I think food is always it's a metaphor that I think a lot of people understand, because you have to eat, and it's physical. It's a physical act. I think that's another reason I'm always drawn to it.
What about your guys' high points, or what's your favorite things that have happened to you? Maybe it's a project that you didn't do together, but it's probably something that you collaborated in. I know that you did the Everything Rises and effects, and maybe Everything Rises is something really important to you because you had it as an award winner in festivals.
I think for me, like a high point, it's interesting, like when you make stuff, when you're done, you know, the way that the cycle of like artwork works is like when you get the idea, you think like, oh, this is like the best idea ever. I'm a genius. And then and then you start to work on it and you make it, and as you're doing it, you think like, oh my God, I'm an idiot. I don't know what I'm doing. This is a terrible idea and I don't know how to execute it, and it's not like I imagined at all. And then when I get to the editing process, then I'm like trying to fix it and like figure out how to make it, turn it into something. And as then I'm working on it, then it becomes something totally different that I didn't expect. And usually it's not, I've never gotten to like the I'm a genius back to the I'm a genius thing again that I imagined I would get to when I came up with the idea. But I always end up getting something that I'm proud of, in various ways. But when it's done, I always, especially something that me and Luke, I always like to do with him is like when we're finished with a project, we sit down and we talk about it and we say like, okay, so like, what did we learn from this? Like, what did we do that we think we can do better? And we just discuss like, oh, okay, I think when we're shooting, we can make sure that we, get more of this kind of stuff, or we need, maybe we need to upgrade our equipment a little bit for this kind of stuff, or maybe we need another person on set to help us with a certain area. And then it gets me fired up for the next project. So I always kind of look back on work fondly, but I always try to maintain the perspective of like, okay, the next one I'm gonna try to improve and do better. So that's kind of the perspective that I try to have with work like that. I think that's like the kind of non-answer to your question, but the answer is, I think effects for me is a really personal film, and a film that Luke and I think we definitely leveled up a lot in. Like we set out to do a lot of dialogue in that. It's a lot of talking, and we worked with actors that we didn't know. We just met them for the project and we did it. So I'm really proud of executing that. And when I look back on that, I still feel like that's a really solid film, and one that everybody who I show it to, they feel connected to too. I think it speaks to, it's about death and dying and dealing with death, and I think a lot of people understand that feeling and feel connected to the movie because it displays those emotions. So that movie means a lot to me personally, and also I think we did a really good job with it, so I'm proud of that one.
Yeah, that
exactly.
was.
So I would get back to this. It's just, for me, it's executing, and I love, can I use the term, the problem solving? Like when Nick or we have an idea, and then I love challenge. So every time Nick bring an idea to me, I would say, okay, let's do it. And then I will try everything we could to fulfill it, to execute it, and really enjoy or figure out how we're going to do it. It's just, maybe it's part of my engineering background, kind of driving like enjoying of how we're going to do things, then trying to execute it. So I really enjoy being on set and trying to figure out, okay, so how we're going to do it. And every time after we finished and then Nick editing, I was just so surprised that he can nail it even better. Like I always trying to figure out what we're going to be the final product, right? Before we shooting, I would always try, okay, so if I shoot this footage, then how would it come into the film? Like how are you going to put it together, and how it would probably looks like. But every time Nick always surprised me with better results. So I so impressed, and I so enjoying of making each shot, because each, for me, I feel so fulfilled of problem solving and then executing photography. So for me, I opposite with Nick. And he doesn't really enjoy on set, but I so enjoy on set. So
well,
so it's just both.
I always say that I don't like being on set, but more and more I do actually really enjoy it, and it's something that I've learned to like, and especially like, that's going back to the previous thing about like something that I learned from Luke. Actually, that's something that I learned from you, is to enjoy set, because before, set was always stressful for me. Like getting the shots, I always was just like, oh, I have to get this, a time limit, and all this stuff. But working with Luke, he allows me to feel more comfortable, and because he likes set so much, it reminds me like, this actually is kind of fun, because I can see him having fun, and so I'm like, I need to try and live in the moment here a little bit and enjoy this. So that's definitely something that I try to take away.
But you know what? Because because the anxiety of you being in on set, because actually that helps a lot. Sometimes you will manage the timing. You will know, okay, we need a schedule to catch, because some director doesn't really have sense of that. So a lot of time we just spending like hours doing nothing, but you always pushing me forward. Like, okay, it's time to move on. Let's shot. Okay, we're done here, so let's go. So it's good to have someone like you to let the whole teams know, okay, we need to move on and then go. It's not wasting time of some sort of thing. That's really important.
I'm glad my anxiety is useful.
It's super useful. I really enjoy. I mean that's someone must to have this kind of this kind of mindset on set. Otherwise, we was just spending time of doing nothing.
Nick, stop being so good. This case about the crushing boots in Crush, do we want to talk about the actor part in that, or is that a secret?
Oh no, I mean we can if we want to. Like there's a cameo with Daniel Scheinert, who's the director of Everything Everywhere All at Once. He acted in that film. So you can see him when he was in college. We went to Emerson College together, and we were friends. Another person in that film actually is Billy Chu. He's the guy that's with the girl. He is the writer of a film called The Death of Dick Long, screenwriter, and they're really good friends still. That was also directed by Daniel Scheinert, and he was a screenwriter of that. So there's a little bit of Easter eggs for art film lovers in that, my thesis film.
Well, there were a couple of short films shot in Europe. I was wondering if these were shot on the same script, and how did all those come about? We have the Survival, the Auschwitz-Birkenau short doc, and then there's the Twins of Firenze and The World is Your Ashtray. Anything about those?
Yeah, those are projects that I worked on when I was living in Berlin for like 14 months. And all of those were created by myself. I didn't have Luke at that time. Luke was in Taiwan. And so I was just trying to I always try to create with whatever resources I have. I didn't really know anybody there. So I tried to adapt the projects and what I could do to what I was able to do on my own. So The Places You'll Ash came about because I was with my wife and we were traveling all these different countries, and I noticed that Europeans smoke a lot, and I just kind of started an Instagram page actually called The World Is Your Ashtray, and I was just taking photos, and then I realized this is kind of an interesting film idea, and so I made it over the course of the whole year. Just every time I would go somewhere and I would see a beautiful place, I would try to get a nice shot of it with a cigarette butt in frame. And it was surprisingly easy to do. It didn't take that much time to find cigarette butts anywhere. Like I would just go, I would see something and I'd be like, okay, look around for 3 seconds. Oh, there's a cigarette butt. Okay, frame the shot. And then if that shot didn't look quite right, I'd be like, okay, I can just move over 10 feet. There's another one over there. I can reframe it and set it up. So
I wonder where this trend started, because maybe you started it all, who knows. Like there's a couple of those Instagram pages taking pictures of cigarette butts on Instagram. And probably kind of self-explanatory how your experience was at Auschwitz. I've also been there once. It was a really quick visit. It was just about to close, like 15 minutes, let's run and check out some horrible places. But yeah, part of the place was closed when I was there, but the main area I understood. But I mean it's a difficult place to be in, and you can really feel the just kind of the, I don't know if people believe in like spirits and stuff like that, but I'm a skeptic in most areas, but when it comes to that kind of stuff, and when you're in places like that, it takes your skepticism away a little bit, because you can feel just kind of, I don't know, the energy of the stuff that happened there when you're there. So, I didn't really know that was another case of like, I didn't really know what I was going to do with the footage. I just
had my camera and I was filming, and then I kind of compiled it in the editing room in a way that made sense to me.
Yeah. Well, dark clouds is something that you both, I understand, don't really want to spend too much time on. I think it's something that also can be seen in your material, such as films like Holding a Spark and Effects.
Yeah, that we worked on that together.
Yeah, so these two, they kind of go into the whole that you have this negative self-talk, or you have negative thoughts, and then you find your way out of it.
Yeah, that work was actually written by Luke's wife.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah. She's very talented. She's also an artist of. She's now doing ceramics. So she draws, she do ceramics, she writes. She also a model.
Yeah, and we had talked about kind of like the feeling of like when you're working on something and how you don't feel like it's good at a certain point. And so that was kind of the thing that we had discussed with that. And then she wrote that script for that. And then Luke and I kind of came up with the visuals for that to match to the script. It's kind of more of like a visual poem, I would say.
Well, speaking about visual poems, let's reel us all the way back to Dark Landscape and therefore back to the work you guys do, and let's try to gear this whole thing towards ending the session finally. But talking about visual poems, Dark Landscape, Nick, you mentioned that you didn't really like, or you didn't used to like being on set, and you find it kind of anxiety-inducing.
Yeah.
Yet Dark Landscape opens literally on the set. We have a weird kind of a meta breaking the fourth wall, showing us the filmmakers doing the set film or in-universe interview in that moment. And we are also taking some cues from grimy old VHS Outlook, and we are telling a ghost story where the ghosts are, at least in my reading and in my interpretation, are not so much a lethal or carnal danger and not in the film even per se. It's a ghost story kind of without ghosts, and the ghosts instead are more as emotions. The dread of breaking up a relationship, longing, isolation, stuff like that. The ghosts are more emotions and feelings, at least to me in Dark Landscape, and that kind of, for me personally, brought the whole experience closer to the old gothic roots of ghost stories, so like something that Le Fanu and Shelley wrote on their time. So kind of my first question concerning Dark Landscape, like where actually did the idea for a ghost story without ghosts came from, and how was it like to shoot this type of kind of traditional but at the same time extremely experimental horror film?
So that film came about because Luke was moving to New York, and I wanted to do one more work before we left. But we kind of were talking and we didn't know what we were going to do. And so there's this film called Symbopsychotaxiplasm. I don't know if you guys have heard of it. It's like one of my favorite films. It's great. But it's basically this experimental documentary where the people making the film talk about making the film. And so the idea for this started of like, okay, I'm going to remake that kind of thing, but as a horror movie. So we met that meeting in the beginning of the film, and that kind of replays throughout the film. That's us planning this film. So like we meet and I was like, okay, we're going to film us talking about what ghost story we're going to tell in this movie. And so, I asked all the actors like about their experiences with ghosts, and we all talked about them. And then after that, I took what they said, and then I wrote a script kind of loosely based on some of the stuff and the themes that they had talked about. And a lot of it had to do, interestingly, with like the creepiest things that had happened to them kind of had to do with their relationships with people. And so then I tried to draw that theme out of like, that is really, I think, what people are connecting to when they're connecting with ghosts, is they're connecting with their ideas about relationships with other people. And that is like a presence in their life that haunts them. So that was kind of the way that I thought about that.
Yeah, it's a it kind of piqued my eye, because kind of looking back at the history of a ghost, that's kind of what ghosts have been traditionally in the early days. When we kind of came up with the ghost, ghosts were seen as some type of a non-physical embodiments of these feelings, longing and losing something, and perhaps not getting justice for something. They weren't really the today's typical Hollywood jump scare, monster, danger things, but there were something more profound. And therefore,
Yeah.
I immediately kind of started to look at that. Oh my God, you guys are taking this kind of more old school approach to what a ghost is.
Yeah, it's funny too, because I remember when the film, like when I was finishing the film and like showing it around to people and stuff, and kind of I put up a trailer for it. You know, certain people that I know like aren't really into art films were like, "Oh, cool, you made a horror movie. Like, I really want to see it. I love horror movies." And I was thinking, "Yeah, you're probably not gonna like this one because it's not really like it's not like a horror scary kind of a thing."
Yeah, it's not a paid thing jumping at you screaming.
Yeah. It's kind of, in a way, it's even something scarier. It's like the horror of your emotional attachments.
Speaking of emotions, how much of some of these films do you think are stemming from your own experiences when it comes to effects, perhaps? How much is there about like true loss, if you want to talk about that kind of things?
Well, I mean, I try to, with everything that I do, I try to have it come from a genuine place. So things that I'm thinking about and feeling, I always try to put into what I'm working on and my ideas. And effects, when I made that, it was a few years after my best friend had passed away, and so that was what I was thinking about all the time. And Luke actually inspired that movie, because I had just come back from Germany. And I met with Luke. We had lunch, and he was like, "We gotta make something. Like, I really miss making something with you. Like, I want to shoot something." And at that time, I wasn't really thinking about making stuff. I was kind of feeling a little like all over the place. I was moving back to Taiwan. I didn't know like I'm looking for jobs. I don't know what I'm gonna do. And when he said that to me, I took a train. I was taking a train back from Taipei to Shinju, where I was living at the time, and I just wrote it. I wrote the whole thing. It just like came out. All these things that I was thinking about and feeling came out in that script. And so it was a really good thing that I think Luke allowed me to release those emotions. And making that film was a really important experience for me in dealing with the way that I felt about the death of my friend. You know, a lot of that stuff I was able to explore through the making of the film that I think I wasn't really dealing with personally. So yeah, that was a good experience. And really interestingly too, like when we were shooting that film and we were on set, there's one scene where the actor was on the roof, and the actor who was playing the dead character, my friend, he's on the roof and he was talking, and back to this idea of spirits or whatever, like I really felt that presence of my friend in the way that he was behaving and acting. I was like, it was very bizarre. I was like, he is acting exactly like him right now. It was really interesting and strange. So I think that that's, I don't know. That's just something that I noticed as well. So probably a connection there too between that and Dark Landscape.
Interesting. You guys have so much material out there that, it was kind of hard to focus on only one thing. Me as a kind of a completionist trying to go through everything. And then,
I really appreciate that you did that. That you watched so many of our stuff. I think it means a lot to that you guys talk about our work in this way. Because we're not big famous people, but it's cool that you guys watched our pieces and are able to appreciate them and stuff. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, I just kept thinking about things like when I'm going through this kind of work. Yeah, you just see the amount of maneuverability that you guys have, and hopefully keep having, because you're in this type of artistic space with less rigorous requirements and perhaps deadlines and budgets as compared to some of the big ones out there. So that also gives that kind of more room for creativity, I would say. So yeah, had a great time watching this stuff.
For me, Nick is so authentic. He's never lying. He just put his heart in every single script, every single story he wrote. I mean, Nick is really true heart person. Like, he never trick. He never even trying to be fancy or trying to please the audience. He just doing what he really feel right. This is why I appreciate him, because he's really fulfilled the true heart. Not some director really wanted to show off, but he's not. He's just it's really, really, really important.
And I feel at least that sometimes it's hard to know what is authentic and being true to yourself, and trying to navigate that the thing that you're not doing is not so much pushed by your ego to do something because they might like it, or because somebody wants to see this kind of thing. Yeah, it's a jungle out there. So that's amazing.
Tough.
Well, we have been talking a lot, practically this whole episode up until this point, mostly about your video work and the short films you guys have done. But you have done so much else, so much other than just video. I'm especially looking at the fashion photo shoots that you've done together. This is more tightly Luke's territory, but Nick, you also have worked as a director and video editor for some of these fashion shoots. And talking about, Kari mentioned the whole being authentic and pushing your ego, and we have been talking about your kind of punk attitude and the anti-establishment, anti-capitalism takes that at times are pretty on front in your works. And I would say, like, to get into the whole fashion photography that you guys did, I'm thinking more of especially the dolls and red carpet photo shoots, which, well, once again, extremely rich from a podcast co-host to have the maestros here and then start to explain what it all means. But I found a lot of criticism, and pretty profound criticism, of the fashion world in your stuff, in especially like I said, red carpet and dolls, which to me are almost like a sister pieces, which together form a kind of a complete takedown of the fashion industry itself. So, kind of to summarize this all into some form of a question, what exactly was like both to you, Nick, and Luke, like, what was your coming viewpoints? What was the point of view you came into dolls and red carpet?
I'll let Luke, why don't you kind of explain like the creation of those? Because that is, I think, something you started.
Well, I don't think much. I just like to shoot, and I just happen to meet some stylists. He able to put out really good clothing and style. So I just asked him if he wants to do something together, and Nick and I can shoot. He just doing the clothing and the styling for us. So for me, it's just a way of experimenting how I can able to pull off like fashion video, fashion photos, because I think the way that interests me is the visually people wearing different clothing and kind of acting like when people put on different clothes, they have different state of mind. Like they can pretend to be someone else or being different person. So for me, I can spot their minds that is changing when they have different outfit on. And then the red carpet is really, if Nick put on the idea of people walking midnight with red carpet, so turn the city into their stage, which is phenomenal ideas. So we fall in love in this idea right away. So we just decided to shoot it in midnight in a very busy city, in the heart of the city, which is normally packed with people, but because we shoot it at midnight, so there's no one there. And then we're able to film and shoot there with just empty city and two models. So it's a way that it's a kind of dreaming stuff, like not necessarily talk a lot, but just the way we play with the city, how we interact, like put our dream when we live in the city, and then people have the freedom to be someone else. So I think styling and fashion shoot is about dream, right? Dream come true, or being someone you wanted to be. So for me, it's just a fun stuff. You know, I love to just like I said, I love filming stuff. So just try it.
Yeah, and for the ideas, for the concepts, like Luke basically said he wanted to shoot these videos, and I knew that the point of them, you know, the images and the photography is the star, should be the star of these works. So I tried to come up with concepts that were connected to fashion in a way, that were simple, but could allow, you know, interesting images and to show off the clothes and the photography and Luke's composition. And so they basically were just concepts that I started with. I think it's interesting that you said that like they're kind of punk and anti-fashion, and like a condemnation of fashion. That might be like something inside me, maybe, that like when I came up with the concept that I'm putting it on, like that kind of came out naturally. But I also think that a lot of that maybe has to do with the styling choices of the stylist. I think he has a kind of punk aesthetic as well. So I think that's a big part of it. But I really love the way that Luke used the imagery, especially in both of them, and especially in Dolls. I rewatched it recently before this interview, just kind of looking back at some of the stuff, and you know, I forgot how impressive a lot of the photography is in that.
Yeah, I kind of like to explain perhaps a bit like what I meant, or how
Sure.
I saw them as a certain type of condemnation of the fashion industry. In Dolls, well, fashion altogether, it has always been somewhat objectifying of women, and they are kind of like mannequins. In that sense, living mannequins. And in here we have the shoot called Dolls, where especially in the film, you have it's got in a way that you have this kind of a stop motion movement there with them, which kind of enhances the feeling that these people here now, they are living dolls, they are living mannequins. And then especially, like I said, to me, it was a sister piece with Red Carpet, which, in my eyes, approaches this the kind of another thing that fashion usually loves to do, which is to go into basically go into other people's spaces. In 2022, there was a fashion show that was staged. The stage was created to resemble a skate park. In 2019, Dolce & Gabbana Autumn Moda had a fashion shoot in a UNESCO World Heritage Site. They've held fashion shoots at Great Wall of China, in Trevi Fountain, and underwater. So fashion world, it joyfully, not to say colonizes, but colonizes other people's and other subculture spaces and borrows from them whenever it kind of just feels like it's old or it's okay, or whenever it wants something. It comes to punk culture and steals punk aesthetic because it just happened to feel like it. You know, today and tomorrow it will steal from the gay community or transgender people or whatever happens to be trending. That's kind of how fashion works. And then on red carpet, basically what you have real streets, you have real urban environments, and you have the two models who have literally stolen the sacred red carpet and now has taken something from the fashion world and is putting the red carpet on actual streets to be trampled on and to tie around trees and stuff like that. Like, to me, that was like red carpet and dolls. To me, they came together as this deeply critical and kind of actually really smart criticism of how fashion works and how high fashion works and behaves.
I gotta say, I love these interpretations. I think it's great. and you know what, the best thing about it that is that I think that's the cool thing about art too, is that, like, a lot of the stuff that you're expressing is not something that I don't think Luke and I had in mind when we were making the piece. But, we did put thought and careful preparation into the way that we were doing it. And we have our ideas about what it is. And then, you can see it and you can get that out of it. It's just the great thing about art and how it can be personal for other people. And you can have those different thoughts and it can inspire all that in you. I think that's like just really cool, and it makes me feel pretty good that you got so much out of these things that we worked on, because Luke and I did put a lot of effort and work into both of those pieces. So I think it doesn't necessarily matter. Like, that's the great thing about criticism and what you guys do, and what Luke and I also do on Mint Volcano YouTube is, like, there's this other meaning that can come out of art and work when you interpret it, and you can explore some of these things that are hidden inside of these pieces that maybe the artist didn't even know were there.
Exactly.
Yeah, that to me is the reason why art is a universal language. And as long as we kind of keep communicating in some form or the other, perhaps, we still might have like some hope. But basically it's the founding idea of whole EU. Like, as long as people have a space, they have a reason to come together and talk about things. It kind of keeps people away from doing stupid radical mistakes. So in that way, I see art as something that can have a healing factor, and it can have a factor. It's a language that transcends the national barriers and language barriers itself.
Yeah.
So from my end and from our end, from the Flick Labs end, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for having us.
That you came to the show today. It was lovely to have you back here on the lab.
Hey, this was great. So regarding just the future direction, of course, we discussed Dark Landscape, which is still looking for its release on film festivals, and you gave us access to that film, so thank you for that.
Yeah, so it's looking for screening right now. We'll see where it shows, if it does, but it will eventually. I will release it on YouTube as well. But you can find a lot of our films on Mint Volcano YouTube channel where we also review films, but you can find our work there. And then a lot of the short films are on my website, nickvaky.com. And then, Luke, you have a lot of photography work as well, right?
Yeah, longphoneview.com.
Yeah, and we will add the websites and the link to the websites, also to Mint Volcano YouTube page in this episode's comments and descriptions. So, to everyone in the Flick Lab audience who listens to today's episode, remember to click those links and check those websites, people.
Yeah.
Some really awesome material there.
Yeah, support
Thank you.
filmmaking. Future direction. Do you want to promote anything, or do you have anything in plans right now?
So yeah, like the YouTube channel, I think I would really like people to check out. I'm also, Dark Landscape is looking for places to shown, but I'm also working on some new projects that are hopefully. It's funny, we mentioned getting back to mess a little bit. I'm shooting a film that I guess I'll talk about later, but I just shot a film this last weekend where I was playing with a dead fish. So back to my roots.
Nick, gosh, darn it.
So I'm always trying to create more stuff, work on stuff, and I will be moving back to America next year sometime. So hopefully Luke and I can have a filmmaking reunion and create some cool stuff together again. I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah.
And it would be great to create some art with you guys as well at some point.
Oh, yes.
Who knows?
Definitely.
All right. As you know, you can send us a message by email. We're on Facebook, Twitter, or whatever the heck it is these days, X. We're also available on Instagram, YouTube, odyssey.com. And of course, if you simply want to listen to us, we're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all those regular podcasting apps. And that's about it. Thank you guys so much. Hope to hear from you soon.
Yeah, thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, later.
So, from my end and from our end, from the Flick Lab's end, thank you so much
Thank you for having us.
that you came to the show today. It was lovely to have you back here on the lab. And Glenfi has died again,
Oh, no.
as is typical, and Kari is connecting like crazy.
Oh my god.